The Agricultural Revolution by Gabriel, Don McTiernan, and Zach Hill. The agricultural revolution had begun in Britain and in the Low Countries. The Low Countries consisted of mainly Netherlands and Belgium and some surrounding areas. This was the largest step in the process of making efficient farming. Prior to the successful innovations of the agricultural revolution, large portions of the population were struck with famine and disease. Smallpox grew around and villages could be nearly wiped out in a year. The spread of disease significantly grew due to the weak immune system by weak diets. Diets had grown due to too much rain, which uprooted plants, or too little rain, which dried them up. The rulers had not helped the people either. They collected church tithes and other various taxes. The former system in agriculture was known as the three-field crop rotation. This rotation was at first effective, but throughout time it had grown as quite the bother and was unhealthy and not efficient. The three-field crop rotation was whenever the farmers would first grow wheat, oats, and then finally fallow. Fallow is whenever the farmers had the idea that all the growing would deplete the soil and cause the crops to not grow the next year, so they left that year's fields completely empty. As years had gone by, plants were growing less and less. Time and time had gone by with no success until the idea of the four-field crop rotation. In this system, through time, they were able to grow the exact same crops, but instead of the fallow, they were to grow either potatoes, turnips, or grains. This was used to replenish the fields and left good, fertile soil for the next year. Along with planting turnips and grains to support the fertile soil, they also used whatever grew to feed all their livestock. This caused a large increase of animals. Most of these ideas were brought upon by a man by the name of Thomas William Coke. Coke had infamously replaced his field of rye with wheat, providing more food for many people. Coke also had the idea to properly sell his goods, such as his sheep. Coke would shear sheep and would be able to sell much of that product, such as wool, in order to make new clothing. Later on, Coke would be recognized for his skills and become a political leader in England. The three main points about the agricultural revolution was science, technology, and entrepreneurship. Animals such as cattle grew more important by the year, but their size was not fit to feed large amounts of people. This brought the idea founded by Galileo Galilei on experimentation. People began to crossbreed certain species of animals, such as cows, to form larger cows, such as the Belgian blue cow. The more meat equals the more people. This is known as selective breeding. With, with this scientific innovation, people were able to properly breed animals in their desired ways. The work field mostly consisted of large groups of peasants working on a field which would either belong to one person or even no one. This method of farming was known as the common pasture, and on the common pasture would be tons and tons of cattle, which were originally just cows walking around and doing whatever they do to repopulate. The new way to do cattle raising was to have enclosures for the cows, who belonged to a single person. This, however, was bad for the poor farmers who could not make fences. This also resulted in the loss of grazing land for cattle on the old common pasture. Despite the loss of land, enclosures created less space in growing, which aided the process of selective breeding. The results of selective breeding included larger cows, which meant larger food supplies. In this instance, the food products began to drastically change. in a good way. The increase of food products also brought up the idea of entrepreneurship and a more market-oriented lifestyle, creating more chances for people to make money and to get food. Changes constantly arose as many of the poor farmers were chosen to live in one house known as a poorhouse. This poorhouse has been made up by the government in which they believed to accommodate these poor farmers' lives and to improve it. The people in the house would live and work together. The main purpose of these houses was to implement a more long-term effect on the harvest land. Those would ultimately work, but the only difficulty was with time. Old old instruments such as sickles and scythes were massively used in these fields. Scythes and sickles were used to slowly cut things such as grains and wheat. One of the oldest methods of farming was known as Jesus' parable. Jesus' parable is when a farmer or a sower goes into the field with a bag of seeds and simply tosses the seeds into the open. Many times the seeds end up in odd places and are unable to properly grow with fertile soil. This consisted of nearly zero science, and many farmers and innovators designed new methods of farming to contradict their lack of science. Throughout time, farmers incorporated their scientific methods to invent new tools. One of the leaders in innovation was Jethro Tull. Tull was known mostly for designing the first seed drill. A seed drill is a machine that can run along the soil and it injects seeds directly in the ground to ensure farmers that their seed would end up in the fertile soil. The infectious innovation grew to parts of America and to people such as Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson began to invent new things to innovate crops. His new invention was the moldboard plow, which would require less cattle to cut down crops. George Washington also began to add his genius to the agricultural revolution. He then invented the 16-sided barn, which was used to generate machinery. This machinery was known as a threshing machine, which had separated the small seeds from its larger crop. This was extremely useful to continue harvest. With ideas bouncing back from America to England, people were finally blooming along with their agriculture and harvest.